Hi guys, I'm back for another video. Please excuse the different angle. I'm still trying to figure this out. I have my iPad on a chair and there's a lamp up above it, so don't really have any nice lighting or any good place to film just yet, so please bear with me as I evolve. I'm here today to do my January wrap-up. I read 7 books in January, which for me is really great. The first book I read I actually don't have with me. I loaned it to my mom, and that is Confessions by Kanae Minato. This was a mystery type fiction novel. It wasn't really mystery because there wasn't necessarily a crime that had to be solved. You kind of figured out who committed the crime right at the beginning in the first 20 pages or so. And so really what all you're doing is discovering kind of the aftermath of the event. So this follows a teacher whose young daughter was found drowned in a pool, and everyone thought that it was an accident and that the girl drowned, but actually the teacher says that it wasn't an accident and that her daughter was murdered by 2 people in her classroom, 2 kids in her classroom. And it's told in, I think, 4 or 5 different parts from different perspectives. So one of the teacher and then a few of other people. And it kind of centers around the same event, so you find yourself jumping back in time a lot with each different section, and then kind of experiencing that event from different perspectives and getting more information about from each character about what happened, which is really exciting. I liked it a lot. I read it very quickly. I think I gave that 4 stars. The next book I read I do have with me, and that is The Girl in the Fridge by Etgar Keret. I hauled this recently, and I mentioned in it that Keret is a Israeli author, and he is apparently pretty famous. I didn't know him, but then again I don't really know anything about Israel or popular Israeli literature. Essentially these are just very short stories, usually 1 to 2 pages. I think the longest story was like 8 pages or something like that, about different scenarios, different people. There's not, as far as I can tell, there's not much of a connection between the stories, except for they're all very dark, so some are pretty grotesque. There's a magician who thinks he's pulling a rabbit out of his hat, and he ends up pulling out a dead baby. I liked pretty much every single one of these. I think I read this in a day. There was one story that I had a lot of trouble with. It was just kind of, to me, what felt like pretty pointless violence against a woman, and I didn't get the point of it. It also made me feel like I don't really know enough about Israel, because they mention a lot of names and a lot of different cultural aspects that if it's an American book or, to some extent a Japanese book or something like that, I can understand pretty easily, but this one I had really no idea. But I loved this. The next book I read is Wyrd Sisters by Terry Pratchett. This is a Discworld novel, and it's the 2nd novel in the Witches series, if you can call it a series, of Discworld. For those of you who don't know, Discworld is a very expansive fantasy universe made by Terry Pratchett, and it has something like 32 books or something like that, and they're all basically standalone, except you can read them in certain reading orders, and certain books follow certain characters. I've actually only ever read books from the Witches series, so this is my 2nd Discworld book. I've read the first one, Equal Rights, before that, and I thought that one was really good. I actually started this in June or July of last year and stopped halfway through and then just picked it back up because I was kind of in the mood for it and in the mood to finish it. This follows the story of, as all the witches stories do, I think, follows the story of Granny Weatherwax. She is a witch in Discworld, and there's a murder at one of the castles in one of the kingdoms of Discworld, and she is kind of called upon to help solve the mystery of who killed the king and try to kind of rectify things, because the land itself is very unhappy with that turn of events and with the current king, and so it's kind of up to her and her very interesting coven of 2 other witches to solve that problem, begrudgingly and slightly unwillingly. So it's pretty funny. It satires fantasy while at the same time really creates this whole huge, unique world. The next book I read is a comic book, and that is Avengers vs. X-Men. This is another book that I hauled recently. To recap again, this story follows Hope Summers. She is from the future, I think, and she is kind of all her life she's been prepped to possibly get what's called the Phoenix Force, which is this huge cosmic incredible power in the Marvel Universe, to have that like possess her basically. And so she's been trained by X-Men for that to happen, and finally it does start to happen, and the Avengers decide that Hope really should just be killed, I guess, instead of taking the risk of having another mutant be possessed by the Phoenix Force. And I guess this sets up what the kind of current Marvel Universe is, and so it was pretty interesting. The only issue I had, the same as every other Marvel comic, is that I haven't really read a lot of them, and so I don't necessarily know what's going on, or who the characters are, or why I should care about these characters sometimes. So I had that trouble again, but you know, there were enough characters that I recognized, especially the X-Men characters, not so much the Avengers characters, to make it exciting and interesting. And there's a whole series after this, and I've kind of looked up the reading order and what I should read next, so I am going to be doing that. The next book I read on my iPad, so I don't have the physical copy, but that was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I think a lot of people have read this book, so I don't know how much I have to dive into the plot, but basically there are gods and they live in modern day America, and they're slowly losing power because people have kind of stopped believing in them, and these new gods, so the god of like media, or the god of technology, or the god of the stock market, or whatever, these new things that people kind of believe in and pray to, essentially, are gaining power. And so it's kind of the fight between them and this sort of mortal who gets stuck in the middle. The main character, Shadow, he is the mortal, and he was very interesting to me in that he seemed to just really go with the flow with everything. So it was like, oh, there are gods and they actually exist, and he was like, okay, great, and kind of he was kind of numb to everything, or nothing really surprised him. I think there's kind of reason to that, and Gaiman kind of alludes to that later on in the story, but it was still something a little shocking, and it made me have a little bit of trouble relating to his character, basically. The next book I read is The First Bad Man by Miranda July. Miranda July, if you don't know, she is a fiction writer. She has written a collection of short stories called No One Belongs Here More Than You, which is definitely one of my favorite books of all time. She also has done a couple of movies, one of them being Me and You and Everyone We Know, and another one being, I don't remember the title of it. I actually haven't seen it. But I like her work a lot. It's very, like, hipstery, weird content, and that's completely fine with me. I like it. And this is no exception. It's about this older woman, I think she's in her 40s, and she has her boss's daughter come and live with her, a 19-year-old, and a relationship kind of builds from there in a very odd way. There's a bit of like a power struggle, and then it becomes very emotional, and then also kind of becomes sexual, and but in a very odd way that kind of is very reminiscent of how Miranda July writes everything, basically. Definitely it's quite strange. There's nothing fantastical about it, you know, there's no magic or anything like that. It's just very strange realism, very strange fiction. That being said, if that's your cup of tea, if that's something you like, then I recommend this 100%.
Hey guys, I forgot to mention that I also read Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls by David Sedaris. This was an audiobook. It was performed by the author, which made it really, really great. I think I gave it 5 stars, and it was totally worth it. If you haven't read a David Sedaris book yet, I don't know if I'd necessarily start with that one, but if you want to read a great audiobook or listen to a great audiobook, that's definitely the one. Okay, back to normal video time. Thanks.
Let me really quickly talk about my TBR pile. I'd really like to participate in Frenchie D's Read Soul Lit project because it's Black History Month and I haven't really read a ton of Black authors, so I'd love to do that. And it actually really works out because there were a couple books that I was planning to read anyway, and they happen to be by Black authors, and so it's great timing and a really good time to actually kind of prioritize these above other things that are on my list. The first one is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. She is an African-American science fiction writer, which that in itself is really great. You don't see that too often, or at least I don't. If you have any other authors who fit that bill, please let me know. I'd be interested to read them. It's basically about a society where society has crumbled, and there's this young girl, and she has to kind of create this new religion, essentially, as she makes her way across America. The next one is actually the Blank Space Book Club book choice of the month of February, I think, and that's Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The only thing I've heard from this author is her feminist speech, the one that Beyonce sampled, which I've listened to like 10 times now, and I think it's so amazing. So I'm really excited to kind of see what her novels are like. It's about a Nigerian who moves to America and kind of leaves, I think, her lover behind in Nigeria, and that relationship. And I will be joining that book club because I want to have someone to talk to about it. The next thing that kind of fits in with the Read Soul Lit genre or project is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. One of the books that I read last year and I really enjoyed was Sula by Toni Morrison. I wasn't expecting, because she's such a famous author and she's so popular and so well known, I wasn't expecting her work to be as grotesque as it is. I don't say that in a bad way. I love grotesque literature, especially when it's pretty real and kind of reflects, someone else's reality, because it makes you think a lot about how that person exists in that, basically, right? So, this book I actually don't really know anything about, but it's a very, very famous one. Oprah's Book Club, hey. I don't know if anyone else is planning to read this particular Toni Morrison book this month. If you are, please let me know, because I would love to have someone to discuss it with. And if not, that's okay too. I'm also participating in the Year of Cosmere. I have never read a Brandon Sanderson book, even though I own kind of a lot of them. So I'm going to be reading the first Mistborn book, The Final Empire, I think it's called. I don't know why mine doesn't have that written anywhere on here, but whatever. This is, I think everyone knows the plot, so I'm really not going to explain it, but looking forward to reading it. I've read about 1 page so far. I have a couple more books, but the last one I'll show, because I don't think I'll get through even all of these, is A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Miller Jr. This won a Hugo Award in the 1960s. Basically, it's another dystopian book where society has crumbled, and these humans who are still on Earth find these writings by this doctor named Leibowitz, and they decide to kind of create a religion around it. So he's called Saint Leibowitz, and you kind of get a mix of his writing and how the people in the future in this sort of corrupt or destroyed society, decayed society, think of his writing. So looking forward to reading this and kind of seeing why it's so popular. So we'll see. I'll be sure to let you guys know. That's it for me. I need to cut this down because right now it's saying it's 21 minutes long, and I don't think anyone will want to sit through that. So, great. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.